You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Thank you so much for joining me once again on the Cabral Concept on this Wellness and Weight Loss Wednesday show. We're going to be teaching you today the 3 labs to test your metabolism and thyroid function. One of the reasons why this is so important is because just like on yesterday's show, hopefully you tuned into that, the 10 telltale signs of an upcoming disease is that you can actually predict, you can actually see diseases forming, right? So you can look at things in the body by running labs, which are called subclinical lab tests. And a lot of these I just told you could do at home, like literally looking for things such as a diagonal crease on the earlobe, such as lowered body temperature, especially in the morning, such as missing the outer third of the eyebrow. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, tune back into yesterday's show. That was episode 788, I believe, stephencabral.com/788. Today's show notes will be over at stephencabral.com/789. So what I want to do today is just, again, all of these things are meant to do this. Help you take back control of your own health. Because I'll tell you right now, you might have the best doctor in the world, but it's still your body. It's still your health. You have to be the advocate for your body. No one else is going to. Because again, even if you're at the very best doctor in the whole world, they probably have 1,000 wellness clients or patients. Meaning like there's so many people they have to take care of. It's not their fault if they can't remember everything that you want to run or whatever it might be. So just, keep that in mind. But at the same time, be cognizant of that, but also be an advocate for yourself. That's what it's all about. So I'm going to give you the exact labs that you can either run through us, of course, or ask your PCP, your integrative doctor, your endocrinologist, any of these types of things. If you see signs of, brain fog, weight gain, trouble keeping the weight off, right? So like you're able to lose weight, but you can't keep it off. You just keep gaining it back. Sluggishness, dry skin, low mood, apathetic, seasonal affective disorder, any of these things. Remember, metabolic rate, metabolism is not just about weight gain. It's not. Metabolism is about energy production in the body. Because if the thyroid starts to go low, you actually start to get the brain fog and the low energy. Why? Because metabolism is not about weight gain, and thyroid's not about weight gain. Thyroid is about metabolic rate, and metabolic rate is about the energy systems within the body. How much energy are we willing to output? And if your body believes it's in some type of survival-based mechanism or something's malfunctioning with the thyroid, well, it's going to slow down that metabolic rate. And because of that, it's going to lower your thermostat, right? And so lowering the thermostat, it's going to make it work more efficiently, right? Because you have to produce less heat. But that leads to what? The cold body temperature, the lower stamina, maybe the lower libido, the lower energy output, the lower ambition, the lower drive, the lower brain function, all of those things, it's low. That's a lowered metabolic rate. So if someone says lowered metabolic rate, and they're talking from a functional medicine perspective or a naturopathic perspective, understand that they're not just talking about weight gain. Because remember, weight gain is a symptom. If someone comes into my practice and says, I'm having trouble losing weight, the last thing I'm saying is like, are you on a low-calorie diet? No. Because what's happening is, I know that it's a hormone metabolic rate-based problem. It is, or it's a toxicity-based issue. It's some other issue. And the reason is that I know that there's a lot of other people who are eating way more calories than them, and they don't have trouble losing the weight. So yes, there is the dosha, the body type for sure. There is that. But even with that, the kapha body type has a lowered metabolic rate. And they have the lowered metabolic rate oftentimes because of lowered thyroid output as well. So again, I love talking about this, and I could go on and on all day, but my job today, my job on every Cabral Concept is hopefully to give you an actionable base step. And that's why, I'm basically pleading with you to go back and listen to the previous Cabral Concepts. And why do I say that? Because every single thing I talk about relates to another thing, right? So if you start to understand that everything is a pattern, that it's a puzzle, And that my job as a functional medicine practitioner, integrative naturopathic doctor, any one of those things, whatever title you want to put on it, because the titles to me don't matter at all. Health practitioner, that works. So think of it this way. Practicing health, that's why I like that. A health practitioner is someone that practices health. Well, hopefully we're all health practitioners. But if you start to see the trends, if you start to look at this as just one giant puzzle, you can say, oh, that's why I have the cold hands and feet. That's why I have trouble keeping the weight off. That's why I have the brain fog. You can understand, like, okay, like this makes sense. And it's going to make even more sense as we start to go through the labs. So let's get right into it. Essentially, there's 3 labs when you go to get your annual blood work every year. All right. So again, I talked about that in yesterday's show. Of course, I want to give you the link again today. And that's because, again, I want you to keep building off of all these things. That's episode 767, StephenCabral.com/767. It was what to ask for and why on your annual blood work. So check that out. That was what you want to ask your PCP for when you go every year to get your blood work done. And again, even if you go to a naturopathic doctor or another doctor, health practitioner, acupuncturist, chiropractor, health coach, whatever it might be, if you go to your PCP once a year, I think that's great. And here's why. Because you can hopefully get your blood work covered through insurance. Now, a lot of times you can't. Like in Massachusetts, I can't get all these things covered. So I just run them myself. That's just the way it is. And I give you a link at that episode 767 on how to run those yourself through a company called Life Extension. There are other companies, but it's just the one I personally use. And whatever I personally use is the recommendation, of course, that I'm going to give you. And then in episode 774, I tell you why running just your blood work is never enough. And that's what I'm going to talk about as well today. So when you go to your PCP, they're going to test what's called your TSH, your thyroid stimulating hormone, okay? Thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH. That's standard on most blood work. But you never know. Sometimes your doctor, runs blood work and doesn't put it on there. So just make sure they're putting it on there, all right? So now the standard range when looking at your TSH is a little off on conventional medicine. And that's because, remember, they're testing people in a disease-based state. So whenever I say disease-based state, what do I mean is this? The body's out of ease, right? It's at a dis-ease. So we need to look at it from a different perspective. We need to look at what's healthy and what's optimal rather than, simply, okay, well, this person's almost out of range or they are out of range and now they have Graves' disease or they have Hashimoto's or one of those things. Okay, so on your blood work, your TSH is measured, and typically at most labs, again, you have to check your lab's reference range. This is really important because this is also why I'm able to help people from literally overseas in the Middle East, all sorts of different countries, and their lab reference ranges may be different. But as long as I can see that lab reference range, I can always tell them whether they're optimal or not. And so again, when you're running your TSH, you're looking at what's called milli-international units per liter, okay? You don't need to know what that means, but the number for you is what means. That's why a lot of times I don't even talk about what units they're measured in because it doesn't matter. It honestly doesn't matter. What matters is the number, okay? So usually the range is 0.5 to 5, but that doesn't mean optimal. Optimal is 0.5 to 2 or 0.5 to 2.5 maximum. Once I see people creeping between the 2.5 and the 3, I know it's only a matter of time before their thyroid starts to become lowered and lowered and lowered and lowered. Now, you might say, well, that's strange because your TSH is going up. Doesn't that mean your thyroid's functioning at a better degree? And it's a really good question because I get that all the time in my practice. So your TSH actually, the lower, the better, unless it goes below 0.5. And that's something called hyper, too fast thyroid, okay? So hyperthyroid would be more something like Graves' disease or Graves. Again, I call it dis-ease because it can be reversed as well. But let's look at it this way. TSH means thyroid stimulating hormone. It doesn't mean how much thyroid you're using. It means how much your hypothalamus is telling your pituitary gland to stimulate hormone production. So it actually means the higher the number, the worse, because it means that less is actually getting to be used inside the cells, okay? So what happens is you need to go from, let's just say, hypothalamus pituitary to the thyroid to produce something called thyroid stimulating hormone, which then becomes T4, which then becomes T3, okay? Activated T3. So that's what we're looking for, okay? That's about 70% of usable thyroid. Okay, so if you're running your TSH, you only get one number, but that's what you usually get on your standard blood work. Now, it's a start, right? It's a start. But now you know, and you can talk to your doctor more, that if your number is not between 0.5 and 2 or maximum 2.5, you can say, hey, my thyroid, although not out of range, isn't functioning optimally. Can I now run a more advanced thyroid panel, which is going to look at other numbers to tell me why my thyroid is not functioning optimally? And they may say yes, or they may say no. A lot of PCPs and MDs, if they're not trained after their postdoctoral work in functional medicine, they will say, no, it's totally fine. You still have plenty of range to go before it's out of range. And well, that's true according to conventional medicine, but it's not going to make you feel great, right? So you want to be optimal. You don't want to have a disease. Remember, health is not the absence of disease, and that's what conventional medicine looks at. Health is feeling amazing on a daily basis. That's what health is, right? Health is not trudging through life and having okay blood work, right? Because that's what I had for a couple years before they could give me a diagnosis. So technically, I was healthy, I guess, because my blood work looked okay, but I couldn't walk up a flight of stairs, okay? So if you can't walk up a flight of stairs, are you really that healthy? No, but my blood work was okay, so nothing they could do. Well, there are always ways, and when I got into functional medicine, I found a functional medicine practitioner. They opened my eyes to all of this, and that's what this next test is. Okay, it's called a thyroid adrenal hormone test. What does it look at? Okay, here's the important thing. It looks at why the thyroid might not be optimal. Okay, the next two labs are going to look at that. So this next lab is very simple and straightforward. It's going to look at your estrogen and progesterone. I'm not going to chat about that too much today. It's going to look at your testosterone and DHEA. Okay, those four are essentially the sex hormones. What does that mean? Those are the anabolic-based hormones of the body that if they're functioning well, meaning they're optimal, you're like, okay, well, this person's body is running on all cylinders. It is healthy. It's in a reproductive-based state. It means their body's feeling young. And that's a great thing because if that's happening, there's almost no way, I have always to say almost no way that they could have a faltering thyroid. And that's because what happens is next. Okay, we look at cortisol levels. Cortisol levels are the catabolic-based hormones, all right? They're not anabolic, they're catabolic. We need both, okay? They both work great. A lot of people don't know, but cortisol, glucocorticoids, are actually a very powerful anti-inflammatory, natural anti-inflammatory in the body. Now, we don't want too much of that. You might say, well, that's kind of strange, but what happens is you can't pump out cortisol for that long, and hopefully not at nighttime, and that's what you want to look at as well with a lab like this, because that will actually start to create more breakdown in the body, tissue destruction, all of those things, free radical damage over time. So what we look at is this. A lot of people with thyroid-based issues, okay, they have suboptimal TSH, thyroid, is because their cortisol levels are too high, or they become burnt out. And it's because previously to becoming burnt out, they had high cortisol levels. What does that mean? Well, it means that the body was in fight or flight for too long of a period of time. And when your body's in fight or flight, what does it do? Well, it slows down metabolism. Why would it slow down metabolism? Because your body thinks you're in a survival-based state. It makes total sense. Hey, we don't have any food. We don't have any water. It's a time of war, famine, whatever it is. Let's not bring a child into this world. Let's try to conserve calories. That's what it does. It lowers progesterone in women. It lowers thyroid in both men and women, and especially affects the kapha body type or the endomorphic body type, without a doubt, in terms of the thyroid. So you just have to look at these things because it can tell you why. Remember, if your doctor says, oh, well, we don't know why the thyroid goes low, well, you can say, hey, I know why, and you can start to look at these labs. But again, if you never test them, how do you know? You're just guessing. That's the bottom line. So the nice thing on this thyroid adrenal hormone test as well, and again, you can ask this by any doctor. Again, I'm giving you the information today. You can choose what to do with it. Is now on this lab, we're also looking at TSH, we're looking at free T4, the amount of usable T4, free T3, and we're looking at TPO antibodies. Why is this important? Okay, why look at TPO antibodies? Because this is a possible reason for the higher TSH. If your bodies have an autoimmune-based response, an antibody-based response, you may have Hashimoto's. Well, that's an autoimmune-based response against your thyroid. Basically, your immune cells attacking your thyroid. Now, again, there's always a reason why, and we talk about that, and I've talked about it before in previous podcasts. But here's the deal. That can be corrected as well. We work with people with Hashimoto's all the time in my practice, and for the most part, people are able to wean themselves off medication. Okay. Here's the deal. But first, you have to get your body healthy first. You can't just come off medication. I don't recommend coming off medication. I recommend working with your endocrinologist as your TSH level starts to go down below 2. Okay. But before that, we need to get the thyroid healthy. So we can look, is this Hashimoto's or is this just low thyroid, hypothyroidism? And if it's not Hashimoto's, meaning that the antibodies aren't high, your TPO antibodies aren't high, then all we're looking at is some type of functional-based deficiency. And again, we can work on that by calming the adrenals, the cortisol-based response, or looking at a few things, which I'm going to be talking about next. Okay, a couple of those items, which this lab also tests, is vitamin D. If your vitamin D levels are low, you can have lower thyroid or lower metabolic output. There's a huge correlation, I've talked about this before in the Cabral concept, between low vitamin D and weight gain, all right? So, and obviously metabolic effect. So what else? This tests insulin and it tests hemoglobin A1C. Both of those things are essentially looking at how your body's regulating blood sugar. So important if you're looking at metabolism and you're looking at thyroid function and you're looking at adrenal function and you're looking at weight gain. So amazing lab test. That's number 2. It's called the thyroid adrenal hormone. When do I recommend that? Well, I recommend running this test if you're overweight currently, because it's also called the weight management test. So, or weight loss test. We call it both. We're actually going to change that in the future to just call it the thyroid adrenal hormone test, because you know by now that honestly, weight gain's a symptom. It really is. Let's look at why you're gaining the weight, because we'll be able to help you take it off. There's no doubt about that. So you're overweight or you suspect thyroid issues, that's when to run your thyroid adrenal hormone panel. All right. Let's say your TSH comes back at a 3.5. 3.5, okay? You'll run the thyroid adrenal hormone panel because you want to see, why is my thyroid potentially off? And it could be a conversion from T4 to T3. And if that's the issue, well, we can help you with that, all right? Or your integrative medicine doctor can help you with that as well. So the next one is this. The next lab is called the Complete Thyroid. So it's called the Complete Thyroid Package. It's just a lab test that goes a little bit deeper into how the thyroid feeds itself and how it becomes destroyed. All right. So this is a lab test I recommend running if you have Hashimoto's. And if you have Hashimoto's too, I would definitely run the organic acids test and the food sensitivity test. I can't recommend that enough. Why? If you have Hashimoto's, you're most likely having some what's called molecular mimicry or cross-reactivity of the immune system. The immune system's not really messing up. I don't really believe that it messes up. What happens is it can cross-react. It can cross-react because of intestinal permeability, increased intestinal permeability, leaky gut, where your body's spilling proteins out, or it's reacting to gliadin or gluten in wheat-based foods. It's reacting to dairy, like cross-reactivity with certain proteins. So because gliadin is a protein in wheat. So you want to look at those things, and you can see that on a food test. You can see the leaky gut, the intestinal permeability. Again, it can't diagnose you, but you can run an organic acid test for that type of bacteria and candida as well. So that's what I would do if you have Hashimoto's. Run the Complete Thyroid, the organic acids test, and the food test. That's what I would do. If you've already been diagnosed with low thyroid, you already have your T4 and T3 numbers. If you have those, then you'd run the Complete Thyroid. If not, you'd run the thyroid adrenal first. So a lot of people have been asking me. Again, all of these podcasts honestly come from people asking questions. I mean, this topic, it came in 2 weeks ago. And I said, well, I just haven't done a great job explaining the difference between all the thyroid labs. And so let's do a podcast on that. And now it will live on forever. I could always, at cabralsupportgroup.com, which is our free Facebook group that we offer question and answers in and all that type of thing, we can just point to this podcast. So it's helpful for everybody. Well, here's the deal. The Complete Thyroid Test, I hope that you've listened before. I have a podcast. I'm going to try to link these up as well for the 4 toxins that destroy the thyroid. All right, you have to check out that. And the 2 minerals that help to build up the thyroid. Meaning, like, if you don't have these minerals, and I'll give it to you, but I do hope that you listen to that show because I tell you why they work. It's so important that you get the education behind it. You don't want to just know. You don't want me to just say, okay, here are the minerals. They're selenium and they're iodine. You say, okay, great, selenium and iodine. But here's the deal. You need to know why they're so important. So listen to that show because it tells you how selenium helps with the conversion of, I'm not going to give it all away, of the certain T4 to T3, right? And then the iodine of how that's used in the body and the haloids and the inability to detox things like fluoride and chlorine. So check that out. Those are really important shows if you have metabolic-based issues. But what does the Complete Thyroid do? Well, the Complete Thyroid tests those things, right? So again, you can test everything. You really can. So here's the Complete Thyroid. Again, you already know your cortisol numbers. You know your T4, you know your T3. Well, this is a backup, okay? It's going to run your T4, 3 again. It's going to run your TSH again because it's not a big deal to do them again. It's all part of the lab. And it's going to run your TPO, which is great. So again, those antibodies. And again, you want to test that every 12 weeks. So nothing wrong with running that again. Your thyroglobulin. Now, that's a little different. So why run thyroglobulin? Well, especially important when looking at thyroid-based cancer or Graves-based disease or tumor or anything like that. Now, If it's high, of course, you'll want to speak with your endocrinologist. And obviously, if you ran it through us, we would help you as well. So you want to look at that. Again, it's just one more lab. I told you yesterday, you don't have to be frightened by any of these things because all of it's fixable. When you feel confident that you can fix things, you want to know everything. I want to know, do I have the gene for Alzheimer's? Do I have this? Do I have that? So that I know ahead of time and I can fix these things. I can work on them. I can modulate it. So it's important to look at. So besides testing the thyroid in depth, it also looks at the iodine and selenium that I just talked about. But it looks at the things that are toxic to the thyroid. There's so many people out there saying like, oh, you don't need to do a detox. Your body's detoxing all the time. Those people clearly have never studied toxicology. They've never looked at labs. They're just spouting off. I mean, that's just the bottom line. Please do not listen to them because here's why. As a clinical practitioner, and again, obviously there are many of us, it's not just me, you can see how bromine, which is in a lot of processed foods, and arsenic in contaminated rice-based products and other things like that, tap water, cadmium, mercury, all of these things, some heavy metals, can start to destroy the thyroid. You need to test those. If you have Hashimoto's, if you have some type of low thyroid, and you've already run the thyroid adrenal, you know all of those lab panels, this will tell you what you're deficient in and what you have too many toxicities in. You've heard me say this before, but this is the exact lab that backs that up. So the next person who says, oh, well, your liver does this, this, and this. Yes, it does. It does. But at no point in human history did someone give us a new liver. And what happened was about 100 years ago, not quite 100 years, but close to it, we started to invent all of these new things, man-made synthetic chemicals. And because of that, our body it never got used to, meaning like we didn't create a new liver. It can't adapt to all of these things. It can't adapt to DDT. It can't adapt to glyphosates, which are pesticides on foods. It can't adapt to all of these heavy metals, like all the stuff in the environment. Like man and woman were never meant to be exposed to these things. And that's the issue. So you need to give your body some help. And yes, a Dr. Ball detox and all these things will help. Our heavy metal detox protocol will help. But get tested first. I mean, that's just what I recommend. Again, if you can't afford the testing, I understand. I understand that. And so yes, do something like the Dr. Ball detox. Do a heavy metal protocol because it's not more than eating normal food, right? It doesn't cost any more. But if you're able to get your TSH tested. After that, if something's off, meaning it's not between 0.5 and 2, run the thyroid adrenal hormone panel. Again, you can run it with us. I'll link it up in the show notes today. Just go to stevencabral.com/789, or just take the information and give it to your PCP. Give it to your local functional medicine doctor. Give it to your integrative MD. Give it to anyone, but get the information. That's the whole point, right? I just try to make it easy for you by doing it online, getting my recommendations and speaking with one of my health coaches, but you can do it however you want to. The biggest thing you could ever do to me for sharing this information, although you owe me nothing, is just to say, hey, I had these level tested. I rebalanced my body. I'm feeling better than ever. That's what I want to hear. Like, that's the bottom line. That's what I would love to hear. And then, of course, if you run the thyroid adrenal hormone panel and you're like, okay, I've got my numbers. I have Hashimoto's. Now I want, and I have a real thyroid function, or everything looks okay on the thyroid adrenal hormone. Now I want to run all of those other factors that go along with the thyroid, such as the 4 toxins and the 2 minerals that my thyroid needs. So I hope that this was helpful. A little bit more of an in-depth show on the metabolism, metabolic rate, and thyroid function. I love doing these shows. I love your questions. I really do appreciate each and every one of your listens. As always, please do feel free to share this show with anyone you believe it could help. Did you know that the body really only becomes sick or imbalanced in only 2 ways? Over time, you become deficient in vital nutrients, and you also accumulate toxins internally and from the environment. As those nutrients diminish and you increase your total toxic load, your body then begins to show the first signs of dis-ease. It's actually quite predictable, and the good news is that if we know how you began to fill up that proverbial rain barrel, we also know how to empty it to begin the healing process. I was fortunate enough to learn this ancient healing process from my mentor after suffering from debilitating diseases for close to a decade. It was only when I began to implement these techniques did I finally overcome my illnesses and go on to live a life of energy and vitality that I now enjoy. I'd like to share with you now what I discovered after traveling all over the world and how to combine the best of ancient healing wisdom with state-of-the-art science.
Allow me to teach you exactly how I've been able to help over 250,000 people to empty their rain barrel and begin to transform their body and lives into what they've always hoped they could be. To get your copy of the international bestseller, The Rain Barrel Effect, simply go to stephencabral.com/rain barrel.